Welcome to episode 34 of Successful Demo. Each episode analyzes theoretical and practical aspects of one more newly released cards. Today is Friday, which means we're going to be looking at Friday Chip. This card reads, "It makes every bad thing that you do so much better." And that basically sums up the card in a nutshell. Because this card basically forces you to play other bad cards in order for them to be, decent. And that is the biggest problem I have with this card. I mean, at first when it was spoiled, I was so excited for a certain combo, but when you actually get down to deck building with it, it's not that easy, because you realize that for Friday Chip to be useful, you need to pair it up with viruses where the virus token or virus tokens are valuable enough. And when you look at the list and take out those that are just not good enough, you only end up with a very few select viruses where the virus token is valuable enough to justify running Friday Chip. Giving Omaqua 1 extra strength, sure, but it doesn't actually protect you against Omaqua's weakness, which is virus purging. Friday Chip doesn't help you with that. Gravedigger, well, it makes your trashes all the more powerful since it shares the same trigger with Friday Chip, but it doesn't help you with Gravedigger's biggest weakness, which is getting the trashing trigger in the first place. Trashing corp cards isn't the easiest thing in the world, which is why the best combo by far with Friday Chip is none other than Imp. With Friday Chip and Imp, this is a combo made in heaven, and this is the one combo that immediately stood out when this Friday Chip was spoiled. For those of you who are unaware, when you use Imp to trash a corp card, you get to trigger Friday Chip, placing a virus counter on Friday Chip after losing your virus counter on Imp. But Friday Chip's able to recharge Imp at the start of your turn. This way, you can basically have infinite Imp tokens as your virus token bounces between the Imp and the Friday Chip, thereby making your Imp an infinite Imp as opposed to one with only 2 users. Now, obviously, there is a major flaw in this otherwise seemingly bonkers combo, and that is the vulnerability to purging. When the corp purges virus counters, both Friday Chip and Imp are reset, which means that now you don't have any virus counters remaining to play with. How do you recover from this? That is the big question you ask if you're building yourself a Friday Imp deck. Firstly, you could trash a corp asset with raw credits. Well, this is actually a viable and reliable solution against asset spam, and this makes this a very powerful combo against asset spam. As long as you find an easy to trash card, such as one of the political assets that cost 2 to trash, for example, you get a counter on Friday Chip, which then loads up your Imp for more trashing next turn. To counter that, the asset spammer basically has to purge every single turn in order to keep the combo at bay, which is a losing move for the asset spammer for sure. If they're purging every single turn, they're not using their clicks to do other things that wins them the game. The other thing you can do if the corp doesn't happen to be asset spamming, which is going to be most of the time, is to play another card in your deck that trashes corp cards for you to activate your combo again. Now that's a bit tougher because you need to start looking through the list of cards, runner cards that can trash corp cards. So after some thinking, this is the list I decided to come up with. It's basically a regular Valencia deck with the Friday Chip Imp combo shoehorned into it. So can you see which cards I'm using to activate Friday Chip and Imp after a purge? Yep, you can see it. I'm using quite a few of them. 5 pieces of cutlery to recover from a virus purge, and this is probably the most reliable way to do it, simply because which corp doesn't run ice? As long as there is ice on the board and you have the correct cutlery, you can reactivate your Imp Friday Chip combo. The other way to do it is obviously to reinstall your Imp, which is definitely doable, which is why I'm running 2 copies of Imp in the deck. Well, this is a Valencia Toolbox deck. It's kind of like Toolbox Shaper by an Anarch, so we're actually running a lot of one-offs. I even have 2 different consoles, which is a little trademark of mine, shall we say. I love having 2 different consoles. I don't endorse it as good competitive Netrunner play, but it gives you solutions against corps with powerful agendas. Turntable helps with that. And in the event that they are not running such agendas, HB is a very good example of a faction that doesn't really require turntable. Well, you just install more and disrupt the hand anyway. So, interesting thing to note is that more doesn't actually synergize with Friday Chip. Friday Chip requires you to trash a corp card as the runner. However, More forces the corp to trash their card. So when the More trigger happens, it's the corp that's trashing the card, not you as the runner. Therefore, it doesn't activate Friday Chip. That is a non-bow. So that's unfortunate there. However, we are playing More not because we want to combo it with Friday Chip. We are playing More so that, you know, there will be double destruction. Between More and Imp, you can work your way through your opponent's cards very quickly and destroy combos like never seen. As you notice, the problem with running lots of one-offs in Valencia is that you cannot guarantee seeing the correct card at the right time, which is why we are spending 5 influence on this Emergent Creativity here. Now, this is not a successful demo for Emergent Creativity, nor have I done one yet. I guess we'll get to that some other day. But anyway, all you need to know is that ideally, the jackpot we hit is Emergent Creativity into More or Femme Fatale. Those are expensive installs, but realistically, you can use it to tutor any of the other one-off cards if need be. Alright, so let's get into the game and see how this Infinite Imp combo pans out. Today we are playing up against an unknown Azmari EdTech deck. We do not know if they are on MC Austerity, if they are on Punitive Counter-Strike, if they are on tags. So because of that, it's actually a bit difficult to decide on our opening hand, which is pretty marginal. And that's one of the biggest strengths of EdTech, you know. When you bring it to a tournament and no one knows your deck list, they will usually play suboptimally, not knowing what to prepare for. The only reason I'm keeping this optimal hand, you know, there's no draw, the economy is scarce, but it has an employee strike, and I know that one of the ways in which Valencia can lose very quickly is if I'm not allowed to set up my economy resources, my daily cast, my liberated accounts, and that's what exactly scarcity of resources on turn 1 does. I've seen deck lists which Azmari EdTech deck lists which run as many as 5 currents attempting to win the current war. So I really want to have strike available in case that's the case. It is not, but I am still going to hold on to my E-strike here. Even though I'm conceding the 2 credits per turn to my opponent as they name event every single turn, I would rather concede economy to my opponent than to cripple myself by playing a strike only to get counter-currented by a scarcity. We still don't really know what the deck is. All I saw was a toll booth and HQ and a bunch of economy that they are playing, burst economy. Yeah, and I'm starting to regret my life choices here as I draw into stuff that is not economy or draw. Being forced to ditch a lot of cards from my hand here is not good. I also have to, at this point, immediately make my console choice. I chose More over Turntable. I run both consoles. It's tough to say whether that was the right choice or not, but this deck is generally not that starved for memory unless I'm setting up a lot of imps and RNG keys. Alright, my opponent goes for install double advance here. I can attempt to check it, but first I want to draw cards in my hand because it will open up options for me if I see something like a liberated accounts of the I've Had Worse, for example, or sorry, of the Earthrise Hotel. You know, I would rather spend the turn taking money than to run the server. However, because I did not draw the liberated accounts, instead I drew burst economy like Sure Gamble and daily casts. What I can do instead is to play my burst economy and then run the remote. However, I do it the wrong way around here. I run the remote first and I nearly get punished for it big time because it's a toll booth that saps my economy. Fortunately, it lands me exactly on 5 credits. Thanks to Valencia's bad pub, I only lost 2 credits from the run, meaning that I can still play Gamble Daily Cast. A very big deal here that I didn't have to click for credits to recover. Unfortunately though, that end the run means that it is probably an agenda the remote. My opponent scores, putting them at 3 points to 0, and SSL endorsement in their score area. This gives me a very big hint of what sort of deck they're playing. I'm putting them right now on the 6 agenda EdTech deck, 6 3-pointer agendas. We still don't know if they are on MC Austerity Policy and Ash, you know, the scoring in remote route, or the punitive kill route. That would be good to find out because, you know, that will really determine whether I should play the I've Had Worse in hand or save it for the punitive. Alright, also another important thing to note, because my opponent hasn't played a single current all this while and has just scored the agenda, it means that they are very unlikely to be able to get rid of my current. by scoring agendas, right? So the only way they can get rid of my strike here is to counter current, and I haven't seen that yet. Now here I drop the imp and run HQ twice to get an imp, use one of my imp counters, and there we see the punitive counter strike confirming what my opponent's archetype is. Some of you at this juncture may have been tempted to play out the combo. As you notice, I had imp and Friday chip in my hand, and I had enough credits to play both. I think a lot of players would have been tempted to just play both cards and start running HQ. The reason we don't do that is because all we need from the combo really is to have one virus counter in play between the imp and the Friday chip. One counter is all it takes to get the infinite imp combo going. Any additional virus counters are superfluous. You don't need them. Since imp comes into play with two virus counters, the first virus counter is, you can just use it without needing to trigger Friday chip. You'll still have one virus counter remaining on imp, as I do here, which is all I need to get the Friday chip combo going. So in that turn, instead of playing the Friday chip, I instead made a better use of my time by playing the E-Strike, which suppressed my opponent's economy and was able to get 2 runs on HQ, seeing the NGO front and then trashing the punitive counter-strike. So I think this is a very important lesson to take away from this play here. Netrunner isn't really a combo game. I mean, as long as you're not playing combo CI7, I guess. It's not about finding your 2 or 3 combo cards and playing them all in succession. Depending on the board state and depending on the nature of your combo, it might not be ideal to play all your combo cards at the same time. If you're sacrificing efficiency or sacrificing opportunity cost to do something else like placing pressure on your opponent's economy, you are still coming out behind. So it's important to not get tunnel vision into a particular combo just for the sake of comboing. I mean, of course, if you're doing a successful demo, it's a different story. I will strive to get the Friday chip down. This would be a pretty good time, right? Friday chip costs 2 to install. That is not negligible. Because of that, I had to take 1 turn off running to set up my economy instead. I could be face checking HQ and R&D ice here, but that's very dangerous given that I haven't found all my breakers yet. And if I install the Friday chip, go down to very few credits, I will be in the danger zone. And I might not even be able to get through the server, let alone fire off the imp and Friday chip combo. So priorities. Imp Friday chip is a nice utility combo, but it's not going to be used all the time. Because I took these few turns to set up, my opponent correspondingly got a couple of turns to set up as well. Now they have a pretty impregnable R&D, and even guarding against the rebirth that I just drew. This would be a perfect time to rebirth Omar and make an Omar run on HQ. But the Archives Ice denied me. So very well played by my opponent, having the foresight to ice Archives against a Valencia player. This is something you should do as a good player. Now I drop my Maw here. I forgot if I mentioned this during the intro, but Maw does not directly synergize with Friday chip. I think I did mention it, yeah. Getting a Maw trigger is forcing the corp to trash a card. You, as the runner, are not trashing the corp's card, therefore you do not get a virus counter on Friday chip. Still, I'm installing the Maw here because, well, memory is nice to have, but also to increase the value of my runs. Now, there's also a subtle anti-synergy here, in that if I use Imp to trash a card during a run, I am not going to get a Maw trigger. So it is anti-synergistic in that sense, but the good news is depending on what card I access, I might say, that card's not worth. I can choose between imping the card and getting a Maw trigger, and that's actually quite important against punitive decks. Typically, I would like to save the imp counter only for trashing punitive counter strikes, right? Anything else, I would rather leave it where it is and get the free Maw trigger instead. So this gives me more options, even though they directly anti-synergize with each other, Imp and Maw. Now my opponent installs advances here. I'm thinking about my opponent's agenda suite and the punitive counter-strike I saw, and deduce that the item in the remote is not of any threat, for the simple reason that if they're running 6 3-pointer agendas, the item in the remote is not a 3-pointer agenda. If it is, they would have to double advance it before I will even consider running it. As a result, I'm not going to run it this turn. And I think that's something to be aware of, depending on how your deck is constructed. My opponent advancing a card here is very fishy. It really reeks of NGO front. So I'm not going to run it. Instead, I'm going to hit HQ here and slam right into a second toll booth, which I do not have the answer for. It looks like I need to start digging for my Black Orchestra frantically, and I found it here. Inject draws me into a Black Orchestra, also bins a Femme Fatale. So the thing is, even though I can break the toll booths on HQ and or the remote, I would much rather use Retrieval Run, which is somewhere in my deck, to fetch the Femme to place on either HQ or remote toll booth. Because breaking toll booth with Orchestra is expensive. If anything, I'll be using Spoon on those toll booth runs, because it costs me 9 credits to break a toll booth, in addition to the 3 install cost of the Black Orchestra. Another thing you'll notice is that this deck is starting out really slowly because I have not drawn into any of my 3 mining accidents. They are a lot less good when you draw them later, and given that my opponent has preemptively iced up all their servers, central servers in fact, it looks like this is not really going to be a game where I'm going to have good economy. The bad publicity is really helpful for Valencia given the inefficient breakers. Unfortunately, it seems I have to be making very targeted runs this game. Now, my opponent pre-reses the NGO front, giving me, throwing me a bone here. They were worried about interdiction even though they were fairly sure I wasn't running it. Well, they're right. Chances are if someone's playing 3 copies of Employee Strike, they don't really have interdiction. Had they left the NGO front unres in the remote, I would have strongly considered spooning the remote to kill the toll booth and to verify the remote. Since I don't have to do that, I'm free to rebuff into Omar and run the most vulnerable server, containing an IP block which I easily break. Now the question is, do I run HQ or R&D here? R&D run would give me the opportunity to access the upgrade in R&D, whereas HQ run will potentially get me a punitive counter-strike. I have 2 chances to get it. I could access it and imp it. If I don't hit it that way, I could maul my opponent's hand for 1 in 3 of hitting a punitive, assuming they have 1 in hand. This is why I hit HQ here. Alright, I access an archive memories here. Now, JNet automatically does the maul trigger for me, even though I have the option to imp and thus bypass and thus nullify the maul trigger. After thinking for some time, I realized that the archive mems was essentially the same as a punitive counter-strike, right? Because they can use archive memories to recur punitive counter-strike. So I would like to have it in the bin. So either way, it didn't really matter whether I got it off the maul trigger or the imp trigger. By right, I'm supposed to decide on the imp trigger first. I would have imped it here, which means that maul would not have triggered. But that's fine, because either way, the imp virus counter would now be on Friday chip, and I would have unloaded it next turn back onto imp. So it effectively made no difference in this situation. But this is something to be aware of if you're playing both maul and imp in the same deck on JNet. I think this is a bug here. It should give you a window to decide whether to use imp before triggering maul. So yeah, we are just discussing it in the chat box there. But as I mentioned, it did not matter. Either way, I just wanted the archive mems in the bin, and since I had infinite imp going, it did not matter whether the archive mems trash was off the imp or off the maul. Alright, we carry on the game here, and you'll notice that I also have Equivocation in my hand. This is an interesting card to have. Unfortunately, I am still facing... I'm not in the first world problem stage yet, because I need to find my breaker suite, and I need to... basically I need to find my breakers. And perhaps retrieval run for the Femme, as my opponent threatens an install double advance on the remote. I probably should go get that. So I made the play that I would have made a turn earlier, spoon onto the remote. Let's see what my opponent reveals on the remote here. It's a second toll booth. That is bloody annoying. Alright, at least this toll booth is going down to my Black Orchestra. Now, the annoying thing is, I do not actually have enough credits to continue on with the run. Down to 5 credits, I can't break the second toll booth, so I'm forced to jack out after the first break. Take a bunch of credits off liberated accounts and then rerun the remote. Alright, I also do get a Friday chip counter because I trashed one of my opponent's cards. Again, as you notice, that is my synergy for recharging the Friday chip in case my opponent purges virus counters. Just use cutlery, all is done. Rerun the remote. It's a degree mill. Now, I'm going to use my imp counter to mill the mill here because there are too many good cards I have installed right now. I can't afford to shuffle any two of them in. The easiest card to shuffle in is the Liberated Accounts on 4 credits, but every other card is absolutely important. I can't lose any of my breakers, I can't afford to lose my Imp Friday chip combo, and I certainly cannot take the tempo hit of reshuffling more back into my deck. So mill goes into the bin, perhaps I'll fetch it at a later time. We are really gambling on the fact that my opponent is not running preemptive action here. But in my head, I'm thinking to myself, the main purpose here is not to steal their agendas, is to make sure they don't score them. Again, I do not want to sacrifice my board state at this stage. It also takes advantage of Degree Mill's weakness, which is that you know, it's a horrible agenda to steal as your first agenda, but if it's the final agenda that you steal, the effect is inconsequential. You can wreck your entire board state and still win. Now I'm gonna Dirty Laundry R&D here. Let's see if I can get through. Given my opponent's only on 5 credits and they're under employee strikes effect, hopefully we will be able to get through and ignore the ice. So employee strike is really pulling its weight here. Unfortunately, even though my opponent is poor, I'm pretty poor myself. I was forced to break Newshound there, putting me down to 0 credits just to get a Dirty Laundry successful run, and I see an MCA Informant on top of R&D. Not something I need to worry about, but clearly my opponent is very worried about that hate card in Film Critic and really wants to get rid of it. So an interesting piece of tech in my opponent's deck to keep in mind. Not going to be relevant this match, but what's more relevant is the fact that I am dirt poor. And that's really bad because if you look at my opponent's board state right now, they have a taxing ice on each of their central servers. I'm not going to be able to break Tollbooths and Newshounds easily. IP block is the only semi-reasonable ice that I can consistently break, which is why I'm going to Omar run here. So picking a good server is important. I'm choosing HQ, and I see another degree mill from HQ. Okay, I guess I'm gonna do the same thing again. Mill the mill, and now there are 2 mills in the bin. Jeez, what are the odds? I mean, we take those. Like, my opponent is denied the opportunity to score yet another one of their agendas, and you know, I'm not losing anything. I am regaining my imp counter on Friday chip because that's what the combo does. So at the start of my turn, after this, I will have 2 counters back on imp, as was the case before that. So yeah, it seems like this is really going to be a game where my objective is to put 3 agendas in the bin and then run the bin to win. Okay, so my opponent plays Scarcity, I think, but I countered that with my own Employee Strike because I drew 3 of them in such quick succession. So my opponent's going to be under permanent Employee Strike for the entire game. They're going to be dirt poor. Again, that doesn't really mean much because I can't siege their servers consistently. So I'm in a very awkward state where I have to decide, do I click for credits for the rest of the game, or do I start drawing through my deck and try to find more money? I'm trying to apply consistent pressure on centrals every single turn, running, making the Omar run, making use of my Valencia Bat Pup. But that's only going to go so far. It's still 2 credits to break IP block every single time. Here I access IP block from HQ and I chose to imp it. Yeah, again, Jinteki does the more imp trigger really weirdly, so we manually fixed that. I needed IP block to hit the bin. And I mean, I wasn't using the imp counter there just because, you know, I had infinite imp counters. I needed to mill the imp IP block because the last thing I wanted is for my opponent to install the IP block on archives and more than double the taxation power on archives. So I really did not want them to get any more ice, which was why I imped the IP block, but it didn't seem like it would come in much use. Obviously, they iced up archives, so everything is double iced out now. The only thing I can do on my turn is to click for credits and of course play the Employee Strike to make my opponent dirt poor. Yeah, they tried to counter me with Scarcity, but it got eroded once again. I'm finding all my strikes. So knowing my opponent's agenda composition, The item in server 1 right now is of no consequence. There's no reason for me to waste money running it. Instead, I want to force my opponent to res their Archives Ice. Let's see what it is. I should have enough credits to get through. No, I don't. It's a News Hound. The grand total is 9 credits for me to break through the entire archive server, 6 for News Hound, 3 for IP block. I can't afford it. So I basically did a very, I had to lose a click and 2 credits there to clear the tag that News Hound would deal me. Obviously I should have beat the News Hound trace instead. My opponent was too poor to boost it. So yeah, I should have just let my opponent fire the trace and beat it with Valencia's bad pup. Misplay right there, but well, I deserve the punishment. Now the game gets really difficult. Every single server costs 6 or more to get in. I'm really regretting not packing my ice carver here. That would make things so much easier. But yeah, as it stands, my opponent has basically arm locked me out of this game. Even though from their point of view it seems like I have unlocked them out of this game because they have 2 of the giant agendas in the bin just incubating right there. So it's a really tense standoff. No one can really make a move here. I can't run and they can't score. The imp is really threatening, as are my potential cutlery, but I don't actually have anything in hand, just a bunch of useless cards. I really want to get equivocation down on the board so that every R&D run allows me to effectively see 2 cards, but that's not gonna happen anytime soon. I'm really poor, and yeah, it costs credits to get that equivocation down. Credits I need to break Central Server Ice. So yeah, at this point I'm just clicking for credits every single turn. I deduce that there's not much better I can do with my turn, and there's nothing, I mean I do actually end up drawing here, playing the I've had worse, but that confirms that there's no more money in my deck remaining as I draw into more draw cards and a mining accident, which is pretty irrelevant at this point in time. So I'm just gonna keep taking credits until something happens, something gives. Maybe they install double advance, or I don't know. Well, I got lucky here. I injected into my final economy card in the Liberator accounts as my R&D is depleting really quickly. The Career Fan to Liberator accounts definitely jumpstarts my economy and gives me at least a couple of runs through the centrals. In the meantime, my opponent's building up their economy of their own with a launch campaign in the remote. Again, this is something I'm more than happy to concede to my opponent. All I need to do is to contest the remote when they install double advance, of course, keeping in mind that NGO front is a thing. You saw me take a peek at archives there. Of course, I was counting the number of NGO fronts in the bin. There are 2 of them, meaning that there's still 1 unaccounted for. Any install double advance card could easily be the 3rd NGO. Just like this one, my opponent installed double advances in the remote. And well, do I get it? I think there's a very high chance that's a piece of bait that my opponent's baiting me with. They have been drawing through most of the deck. So with the spoon in my hand, instead I'm going to go to HQ. Now spoon breaks, destroys the first piece of ice that you break all subroutines on. Even though my opponent reses a code gate as the outermost ice, I don't break all subroutines on it. I only break the end run on Enigma. Instead, I'm going to break all subroutines on the toll booth. That is the first ice I break all subs on. And I access a degree mill once again. Well, that's an absolutely ludicrous turn of events, but I'll take it. Because that was my last click. I chose to mill the mill for the last time, and now am aiming towards running archives for the win. Keeping in mind that of course I need to have 6 installed cards when accessing archives in order to win off triple degree mill. And as my opponent Mr. Buggles remarks in the chat box, I originally envisioned Friday Chip Imp as a nice combo to deal with acid spam decks or to disrupt operation based combos like fast advanced tools and in this case punitive counter strike. It never crossed my mind that Friday Chip Imp would actually be used to deal with degree mill in a deck that doesn't run Film Critic. That's amazing. Alright, so can we do it? Archives is not cheap. I got boned by that News Hound earlier. It's still 9 credits to get through and an outermost ice on archives as well to boot. So it's gonna be a lot of credit clicking going on right here. I'm wondering if I can do it this turn. I don't really want to prolong the game too long because my opponent could easily place even more ice on archives, or I don't know, find some really weird way to win. My Liberated account money is also not the most, so I would definitely want to get this run going. Now, my opponent shows me Newshound here. I do the maths quickly, and yeah, that's pretty bad. So 6 plus 6 plus 3 is 15. I do not have 15 credits. I only had, what, 12 credits at the time of running. So I had to take the Newshound trace, end the run, and wait till next turn. Yep, I just got greedy there. I thought I really needed to go that turn, but I did not make it. I was really banking on my opponent putting a last-ditch cheap piece of ice on archive, something like Enigma or Vanilla, but Newshound really taxing for a deck that runs MK Ultra as its sole sentry solution. And now my opponent's rich. Thankfully, they didn't install any extra ice on archives, so this turn's pretty straightforward. Triple click credit, run archives, I make it through with 1 credit to spare, and I'm going to access the degree mill, shuffling my entire board state into my R&D, or rather into my stack, and winning the game with absolutely no cards installed, and a 3 of a kind in my score area. So many achievements were unlocked in this one game. So yeah, I was really pleased that I could actually showcase this game to you. This is about as good as Friday Chip Imp is going to get. That was basically the MVP this game, allowing me to dismantle my opponent's combo and completely work around their win conditions both ways. They weren't able to score agendas, nor were they able to punitive me to death. And their hate cards in MC Informant was not ready for the sheer power of Friday Chip Imp. All that being said, however, I have to ask myself, had my opponent purged any time during the mid to late game, would the game have played out differently? After all, I mean, I can recharge my Imp using Cutlery, but if they purged diligently every single time after that, I think it would have been a different game. I would not have been able to work around milling my opponent's degree mills. Yeah, I may have exposed myself to a fiery death that way. However, on the other hand, my opponent simply did not have the tempo to purge virus counters. They were already set far back thanks to employee strike, hampering the economy. They really couldn't afford spending turn after turn purging. So I really don't know. After seeing some other games, it does feel like, in my opinion, Friday Chip Imp is the sort of combo where if and when you do pull it off, it's a glorious, amazing show, about as glorious as what you saw in this video. But most other games, you might not just its effect might be lackluster, or it might come too late for it to be of any use. Like, for example, imagine trying to imp against a fast advanced deck which is already at match point. You are trying to put out a raging fire with a bucket of water. Or worse still, you might not even assemble your entire combo. It's a 2-card combo. Sometimes you just won't find a Friday chip, especially if you're not running 3 copies of each, which is my deck basically. So yeah, it's tough to say, but one thing's for sure though. I mean, we all always associate the bin to win with Armand Geist. Well, this video shows you that there is a new champion in town. Friday Chip Imp is the new way to bin and win. Thanks for watching and happy net running. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.